Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. So welcome to Designing and Conducting Effective Member Site Visits webinar. So before we continue, let me quickly check whether you can hear me. If you can, let me know through the chat function, please. Thank you. Great. So at any time, if you are having difficulty hearing me, please let me know. Give me feedback through the chat. So once again, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday. And we are going to be looking at a very, very important theme here, and that is how can we go about designing and conducting effective member site visits. So my name is Kapila Vavegama. I have met most of you at your leaders orientation. I know there are some of you who will be coming to your orientation next month. So looking forward to meeting you as well. And I'm joining you all from Sunnyvale, California. So let's take a look at what is it that we are trying to cover today. So during this conversation, we all will have the opportunity first to identify and examine 5 essential elements that we could pay attention to when we are designing and conducting effective member site visits. So that's our one of the 2 goals or the 2 opportunities we have this during this conversation. The second is then actually to have the opportunity to share strategies and techniques that we can utilize to effectively design site visits as well as conduct them efficiently and effectively for all of the parties involved. So with these 2 opportunities, as I know during my webinars, I kindly invite all of you to participate. There will be opportunities that you can share thoughts, questions, wisdom, your current expertise through the chat function. So please do get engaged, because there's so much we can learn from each other during these conversations. Okay, so what are those 5 essential elements for designing and conducting effective member site visits? We will take a sort of a helicopter view of the forest, looking at what those 5 elements are at the beginning. Then we will take each one and spend time talking about them. So the first one is the purpose. Second one is having objectives. Third element is having a well thought out communication and coordination plan in relation to our site visits. Then the fourth one, as we all know, the logistical element, paying attention in advance to the necessary logistics, and then the follow-up. What do we need to think about doing after we have done our member site visits? So let's take one at a time. Purpose. There are 4 questions we need to ask ourselves before we do a site visit to really bring clarity to why we are doing that. Because sometimes, your VAD might say that you are required to do certain number of site visits during the year. Or your supervisor might ask you, hey, I want you to do a member site visit. That is only an invitation. But what is the real rationale behind it? What is the real purpose? So 4 simple questions to ask ourselves. So the first question I ask myself is, what are the intended benefits for the VISTA member? Because as a VISTA leader, my primary concern is my member. So that's my starting point. Why? What is the benefit for my VISTA member, me doing a site visit to the VISTA member site? Question number 2, what are the intended benefits for the project? for the organization, right? What benefits would this bring for the members' organization as well as for the site? Then, what are the intended benefits for the supervisors? So, me doing a member site visit, what are the advantages or the benefits that's going to bring out for my own supervisor as well as for the VISTA members' supervisor? Question number 4, what are the intended benefits for me as a VISTA leader? What is the purpose for me, or what are the outcomes for me doing this member site visit as a leader? So those are 4 basic but very, very important questions that I would propose, I would invite you to think about before you do anything with your site visit, right? That's our starting point. So how do we find out? Now, this is kind of the purpose-focused questions. Now let's ask ourselves, how do we get the answers to these questions? So one way, I think one of again, a key way to address that is to do needs assessment. So when we talk about doing a needs assessment, you can do it in many different ways. It could be, you can do it face-to-face with some of the parties. You can do it online, or maybe through a questionnaire or over the phone, whatever, the mode based on your current reality with these different parties where they are located. We can use different modes. But the importance is, it doesn't matter what mode we use, but doing a thorough need assessment. So who do we do these need assessments with? Looking at those earlier 4 questions, right, it justifies, right? It just tells us who these parties are. Because our first question was asking ourselves, what are the benefits for my VISTA member? So I need to do a need assessment with my VISTA. Then second is, I need to do a need assessment with my the VISTA supervisor. If I have that opportunity, it's important for me to find out what would be the supervisor's some of the needs with my visit, or some of the things or the resources or anything, information that the supervisor could benefit from. My own supervisor, right? Doing a need assessment with my own supervisor. So in our case, when it comes to our own supervisor, generally, they are working at the same place. So finding quality time, scheduling an conversation with my own supervisor, I can sit down and really ask, take the time to ask, what are the expectations of my own supervisor of me doing this member site visit? What are some of the things that my supervisor would like me to address during my member site visit, right? So those kind of questions. Then, of course, if there are other important stakeholders that you are supposed to be visiting in relation to the project during your member site visit, then if there are such, then I would also connect with them in advance with my supervisor's approval, of course, and find out what their needs are. So now let's take a look at each one of these parties and look at some specific questions that we could ask. But again, let me take a pause here, quickly check whether you can still hear me clearly, because I don't want to make an assumption and continue and find at the end of the session that I was disconnected. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, those of you who let me know. Okay, so the VISTA. Before I share few questions with you, I always like to, tap into the expertise you bring to the table. That's the beauty of us being together, right? Otherwise, you could have just looked at the recording of this webinar. So think about one such question that you could ask a VISTA before the site visit to find out VISTA's need for the site visit? Just one question. So let's, again, when you send your information through the chat, please select all participants so everybody can see your, what you are sharing. So think about what could be one potential question that comes to your mind if you are doing a need assessment with your VISTA member, that the person you are going to be doing a member site visit. What could be one of the questions in that conversation or in the need assessment that you might ask your VISTA member? So let's get some ideas here. Thank you, Elena, for starting the process. What is your understanding of your WAD and the work you will be doing? Thank you. Yes. To see whether there are needs for clarity. And Samantha says, what are challenges the member is currently facing? And also, what are your future goals, plans for your project? Thank you, Samantha. Great questions. What else? What are some of the other questions comes to your mind? And Sarah, you says, what topics would you like to, for further training and resources? Thank you. That's a great area also to find out what our member might need. Let's see. Then, have you had conversations with your supervisor in regard to your WAD? Thank you, Diamond. And Kimberly says, do you feel your supervisor understand what your role is? Great, yes, right. Again, we want to make sure there is clarity, right, among the different parties about the VISTA's role. And great, a lot of questions coming through, so let me try to catch as much as I can. So if I miss anything, please forgive me, and but please pay attention to the chat so you can see what your colleagues are sharing. Yes, as Catherine says about communication, ongoing communication and check-ins with your supervisor. Getting a sort of idea about that and to see whether there are opportunities to fine-tune some of that during your visit. Yes, and Carla is talking about, are you learning about your organization, community, who are the stakeholders that you have come across? Great, because you know what it does, as you all are pointing out through these questions. While it is creating a need assessment, I mean, it's catering to doing a need assessment, some of these questions will also generate some thinking for your members if they have not done some of these at this point, so that they will realize, oh, you know, that's a great idea. Maybe I need to get started with that. So even before you go on the site visit, you are initiating a positive outcome by asking such questions. Yes, and Carl is talking about, let's talk about, right, what a regular day at your site looks like. So really, because this is also a learning opportunity for me as a VISTA leader by asking these questions from my member to understand, better understand too. Then also, as Diamond said, looking at logistical needs, right? And yes, Catherine, this is also a great opportunity to find out what's their current understanding about capacity building and direct service. Because based on what you are learning through this need assessment, then you can plan what kind of conversations, what type of information or knowledge that you can share during your member site visit. Right? So it becomes a productive site visit. It's not just, oh, hi, bye, oh, good to see you. My leader came and, came to visit me. We don't want it to be such a superficial ritual event, but we want it to be customized, individualized, practical, productive visit for all the parties involved. Great. These are great questions. Thank you, leaders. So here are, nothing new as what you have shared. These are along those lines. So a few other questions. These were already said, right? Are there specific issues or needs that you would like me to address with your supervisor when I'm there? anything that you need to meet with one-on-one, conversations, anybody that you would like me to visit while I am there, that is also important, right? So knowing that in advance, then you can make it part of your agenda, make it part of your program, right? So you are not just finding it when you are there and suddenly you say, oh, I would love to meet that person, but I don't have the time, right? So this is about being preventive, being proactive with our site visits. Okay, and also another question, some members might be working at couple of, say for example, maybe working with couple of different schools. So maybe you need to, if I am the leader, I need to know before, in advance, if the member has an expectation for me to visit both of the schools, because that's going to inform how I go about, again, creating my agenda, creating the logistics and all that. And then also finding out what would be what are the most effective days, because in some organizations with some projects, maybe Wednesday is a day that they have such an event going on that it is very hard for a VISTA member or a supervisor to spend time with me as a leader. Me doing a member site visit on that day may not necessarily be the most appropriate time to have some quality conversations and quality time with the individuals I'm going to visit with. So just checking those, right? Learning those in advance. So again, it's going to be a win-win situation for everybody. Thank you. So now, VISTA supervisor. What are some of the questions that we can ask our VISTA supervisor before? VISTA supervisor, not our supervisor. VISTA supervisor before we do the site visit. So let's again hear what are some questions that comes to your mind. What would you ask the member's supervisor in advance? So your visit is also going to be meaningful to the site supervisor as well. Okay, so Helen says, are there any issues that you would like to address at the site visit? Great, thank you, right? So it's because you want, like that supervisor might say, yes, we do have a question about this aspect of the VISTA program, or something, that the supervisor might want to bring to you in relation to the VISTA members' engagement. So then, like in advance, you can think about what kind of conversation you need to have, like how are you going to frame it, how are you going to bring it, address it in an effective way. And Samantha says, yes, are there any resources that you would like me to bring, right? Because you are going from the sponsoring agency. There may be certain things that you can take with you that could benefit them. Thank you. Yeah, how has the VISTA members' engagement been in relation to the project? As Kimberly points out, very, very important, kind of do a sort of a reality check. Yes, and Carla says, checking the progress, how the person, how the supervisor feels about the progress being made so far, because that kind of question can unveil some of the things that may be happening but has not been communicated, but it is important to bring to the surface. So thank you. And Elena is talking about, yes, VISTA's engagement, and also, very good, ask whether the member is actually reaching out to the supervisor for support and stuff. Because if the member is not reaching out, if the supervisor says, oh, so-and-so doesn't really come to me for any support, that might also unveil something. Maybe there's a communication gap or relationship challenge. So since, these kind of questions, but we have to be very careful how we frame the question so nobody is offended, or neither we are sort of pointing out there is a problem, but as you had suggested here, these open-ended questions can help us to unveil. And again, even the supervisor might start thinking in new ways because of the question that you have raised, and the supervisor might think, oh, I have not been, having regular communications. Maybe this is something I need to start doing. So there can be those additional outcomes as well. Yes, when is the best time? As the diamond say, again, we also want to make sure that the supervisor is also fully attentive and available during our visit, right? Thank you. These are great questions. I'm so happy that all of you are being very generous, sharing your thoughts with each other. So let's take a look at some of the questions, sample questions I have here for you. Again, as you can see, nothing new. Most of this you already brought up. One of the things I would say, I would also ask, like, is there any protocol that I should follow during my visit, right? Because the organization might have certain protocols that my supervisor would like me to sort of adhere to. I mean, not my supervisor, site supervisor. So it's good to know in advance. Thank you. Now, let's look at what are some of the questions that I could ask my own supervisor as the leader before I do my member site visit. So what would be such questions that you would ask your own supervisor before the member site visit? Now, this is asking your own supervisor, right? Yes. So Sarah is saying inviting, right? Like saying to your supervisor, hey, let's partner, because this is it's a great way of managing up. So your supervisor also feels that, we are a team, asking whether the person would be interested and available to join. Let's see, Carla is talking about what are the limits exactly, Carla. Very, very important question, because we don't want to cross the boundaries or have a certain type of conversation that my own supervisor, the leader supervisor, might feel, hey, that's not in your domain. So really making sure having that clarity, what is my level of engagement that is expected of me when I am doing this meeting with the site supervisor. Yes, and Helen is talking about if, the supervisor is also going with you. Yes, Helen, very, very important too, right? We really want to make sure we both are on the same page. So it is not my plan, it is then becomes our plan, right? So we don't duplicate things, we don't get into sort of awkward sort of situations where, we are trying to accomplish the same thing but in different ways. So, and also what we want it to be for the VISTA member and the site supervisor and the other people at the site to see and feel that you and your supervisor, if you both are going, that you are a team, right? So that also sets a good role model for the site supervisor and the VISTA member as well. And expectations, yes, Elena, very, very important, right? That is such an important question. What are your expectations of me during this visit, right? Then also, Carl is talking about, can I have a sort of a schedule or agenda? What do I bring, right? So your supervisor, if your supervisor has certain expectations for what the person wants you to accomplish, then that also brought up to the surface. Great questions. Thank you again. So Here are sample questions. Again, as you can see, you all have brought more than these samples, but one of the things again here I would say, are there any concerns about the organization that I need to know? Because my supervisor might know information that would be important for me to know, whether about the site that I am visiting. Relevant information, right? So again, it could be some political stuff I need to, keep in mind, not, sort of getting caught up in a situation. Also, like any other individuals that my supervisor would like me to visit while I am at the member site. So again, along with what you had already shared, and Catherine is also says, do you feel that your organization is respecting the role of the VISTA as a capacity builder? Exactly. So yeah, so Catherine, that would be a more of a question that you would I would ask the members supervisor, because here we are asking our own supervisor. I mean, it could be a question I can ask my supervisor too, but hopefully being there as a VISTA leader at the organization itself, I may have a certain understanding about how my supervisor look at it, okay? So earlier, no worries, Catherine, but it's a great question. It's a good question. There's no question about that, but I think it relates more to the previous set of questions that we can ask the member supervisor, but it's still a very, very important, valid question. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so then our fourth part is, as we said, anybody else, right? If there are other stakeholders, but we are not going to look at the questions because it will depend on who the other stakeholders that we will be visiting, right? So let's say, for example, if a member is assigned to a site, to an organization, then there is the member site supervisor, which we talked about, who we talked about. Then let's say that if that member is working at two different schools, then maybe one of the expectation is that you also meet with the principal or the coordinator from each of the school. Then if it is relevant, then of course, then we need to think about what are the kind of questions in advance we may want to ask those individuals that we will be visiting with, okay? Great, thank you again, leaders. These are great, insightful questions that you have shared with your colleagues here. So I hope everybody taking notes as relevant to them, some things that you can take from this, what is being shared. Okay, so we looked at the purpose. Now, the second element, we are going to look at the objectives, right? So now we have clarity around the purpose. Now we need to ask ourselves, okay, what are the very specific objectives for our site visit? So there are many you can come up with, of course, but I am proposing at least when you think about your site visit objectives, there are four dimensions I would encourage you to think about. One is, some of these actually came up earlier too. One of my objectives, if I am the VISTA leader during my member site visits, is to assess the project progress, to be informed, to learn about, to ask questions that is related to project progress. The second dimension that I would, one of my objectives is to understand, identify what are the support and resource needs of my VISTA member. Third dimension would is to focus on the level of the nature of the effectiveness of the supervision my member is receiving, and how the current communication systems, and to see whether there are opportunities to help the member and the supervisor to fine-tune those communication mechanisms. And then the fourth element is to, objective is to get an idea to sort of understand how my member feels about the work the person is doing, the satisfaction, work satisfaction. So now let's take one at a time, and again ask us what are some questions we could ask now. This is during the site visit, right? So earlier we talked about before the site visit, the need assessment. Now with the objectives, we are talking about now while I am at the site, member site, how can I focus on those 4 areas? Because those are my key objectives. So when it comes to project progress, some of these questions also you may have asked during the, before the site visit, during the need assessment, but also some of them again important to ask during the, while we are there, right? So here are a few questions I would ask my member, whether the member feels confident, right, about accomplishing the milestones or the the objectives, outcomes in their WAD. Are there any, is there any feedback, thoughts, suggestions based on the member's experience being in the project, dealing with the reality about the WAD? Are there things that's not making sense? Not that I have the authority to change any of those, but as a leader, I am in a great place because I can communicate that with other important people like the site supervisor, my own supervisor, and to kind of fine-tune things or get them to fine-tune things so that it's going to be aligned with the reality of the project at that given time. And also, to ask about, so what activities really get you excited about on a day-to-day basis with your project, right? Because we really want to hear there are good stories, positive stories, because I may learn something that I can share with other members. Also, it can inspire other people. And also, as you have said, challenges. So during the site visit too, I will sit down, have a quality conversation with my member, going over the WAD, and looking at any very specific, because sometimes my members could be very vague or general talking about these things, but I as the leader have an opportunity to help them to really look at in a concrete way, identify what some of these challenges may be, and then asking, do you feel like it's going the way the project has envisioned the outcomes to be? So, these are not the only questions, but my idea is to give you some thinking questions that will generate, more questions when you're actually doing your on-site visits. Are there any other questions that comes to your mind at this point that you could ask about the project progress while you are at the site with your member? It could be with the supervisor or other parties. Not only the member, it could be with the member's supervisor as well. So any additional questions that comes to your mind that might give us an opportunity to either be informed or support or guide how they can, enhance their project progress. Anything else that comes to anybody's mind? Okay. Now let's look at the second objective. So the second objective for me as a VISTA leader is to find opportunities that how I can support the members, how can the member support could be increased, whether it is coming from the member supervisor or me as a leader or the sponsoring organization, and also any other sort of resources that we could provide the site to make things better for them. So a couple of questions that I would focus on during the site visit while I'm there. Ask my VISTA member, maybe I have asked this before, but again it is important. This is my face-to-face time. I ask, is there anything that I as a leader can do to help support you? Right? Do a reality check. Find out what areas can I do better as a leader. What has been helpful so far. So this is also an opportunity for me to kind of get very concrete feedback about my own performance as a VISTA leader. So again, these questions you can see, what about my communication with you, right? Then also asking some of the questions such as, some of these also came earlier in the need assessment too. And now during the site visit, you can build on that. So during the need assessment, if somebody has told me my supervisor is not spending enough time with me on a regular basis, so during the visit, then I can bring it up and say, now, one of the things you brought up during the need assessment is that you don't feel like you are getting enough time from your supervisor. So then you can ask, so why do you think it's happening? What could be the potential contributing factors? What have you done? Like, have you reached out to the supervisor? If not, you can help coach the member how to, frame a conversation, bring it up in a constructive way with the supervisor, and also maybe it could be the member who may not be very proactive reaching out, so I can give some suggestions, thoughts to the member, so we can really identify ways to address some of these needs. And then, as we had talked about earlier too, as we are going through the VAD during my visit with my member, to very specifically ask, so looking at some of your challenges and your VAD needs, what additional training or resources or mentoring do you think you could benefit from? Because we have to always keep in mind, some of our members are very, let's say, outspoken, or they will be very open and communicate their needs. But we also have certain personalities. There's nothing right or wrong, right? It's different way of human engagement. But there may be some members who may be who might be reserved or not, feel comfortable talking about their needs or challenges. So this is my time to help them to open up and, talk about them so we can support and guide them, right? Also to ask about like how the guidance support you are receiving your supervisor, what's working, what's not working well, what they have done, how can we address that. So it's a great coaching moment during the member site visit. Okay, then let's see, are there any additional questions that comes to your mind that you could add to your conversations during the member visit while you are talking to the member or the supervisor? Any other type of questions that comes to your mind? I just want to give the opportunity if you are thinking of something, hey, how about I ask this question? So it's not a missed opportunity for the others. Okay, but let me quickly check. Can you still hear me? Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. All right, that's fine. If nothing comes to your mind, that's great. But the idea is to kind of, again, think about, getting some thinking going here. Yes, thank you, Helen. Do you feel that your input is valued? Yes, see, now that's another question, because it has, when somebody doesn't feel that their input is valued, they get disengaged, right? A work experience becomes fulfilling and satisfying experience. One of the key factors, internal motivation, is one feeling that they are making meaningful, valuable contributions, as well as it is being acknowledged, right? So it's very important. It's another great question. to ask. And then if the member says, I really don't feel like my work is being recognized, or that people see that I'm meaningfully contributing, that can open up an opportunity to see why, what could be the contributing factors, and how can we address that. Thank you, Helen. Okay, so then our next objective is, they are very interconnected, as you can see. Now about supervision and communication specifically, right? So asking my member how, my member as well as the member supervisor, some of these questions we can ask from both parties. Some of them could be, adapted to ask from the different parties. So, for example, I would ask the supervisor, how the supervisor feels the VISTA is fitting with the workplace, right? Because there may be certain things that I might be able to become informed, that I might be able to help the supervisor or the VISTA in making sure that it's, the people are feeling comfortable and they are fitting in well with their situation. Again, asking questions about clarity, and finding out whether my members' strengths are being utilized fully, and also checking on their personal and professional goals, right? Because that is something as a leader we can support, guide them. Sometimes some of my members may not even have thought about personal or professional goals, although we encourage people to do that during the PSO. If they have, then ask them. How do you feel? How do you think I can help you? How do you think this your experience, current experience as a VISTA member, could help you to achieve those goals, personally and professionally? And if they have not said, maybe some individuals may not have thought in those directions, helping them to recognize the importance of them and actually having goals, because as we know, it's another motivational contributing factor. When we do work that is aligned with our life purpose, and the life purpose, part of the life purpose could be defined through individual, personal, and professional goals, then our commitment, our passion to what we do increases. Right, so these are opportunities to kind of look at all these different angles and try to create the environment and conditions that will bring the best out of people as well as best to them, a fulfilling, meaningful experience. And also like checking about their material, physical needs. Sometimes supervisors may be too busy, but a member might have a certain need that has not been addressed, and that could be hindering that member's ability to be able to deliver effectively, right? Okay, so let's see, is there any other question that comes to your mind at this? I know it's Friday. Anything that comes to your mind? That you could ask during the site visit in relation to supervision and communication? Anything else at this point? All right, let's keep moving. And again, the idea is to think about in those terms. So the fourth objective, as we said, we are looking at the objectives, is to assess work satisfaction of my member, right? So most of you who have been to the leaders orientation are familiar with these 12 questions, the employee satisfaction questions. If you are not, if you have not been to the orientation, you will learn about them. When I am at the leaders orientation, one of the additional visuals I share with my color group is what you see on the screen. So these 12 questions actually, they are created, or they have been called that, when somebody is working at a workplace, it's almost like you start climbing a psychological mountain, right? So people start at the base camp. There are a few questions. There are 2 questions out of the 12 questions people ask themselves. When it is those have been satisfied, then we move to the next level, camp 1. And there are, out of the 12, there are 4 questions we ask ourselves. When we are happy, if the answers are positive, then we go to the next level, camp 2. And there are, out of the 12 questions, 4 more we ask ourselves. When they are satisfied, we get to the highest level. And this is where out of the 12 questions, there are 2 questions, as you can see from this slide. That's how those 12 questions actually sort of break down to. And then when those last 2 questions are also addressed positively, then that individual is having a fulfilling experience. So for those of you who have not got these questions, it is very easy if you do a Google search and just say 12 employee satisfaction questions. There are numerous websites that will have those 12 questions. It comes from First Break All the Rules, What's the World's Greatest Managers Do Differently, from Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman, from their literature. These are some great questions. So the reason I'm sharing those again, you know, I would use those 12 questions with my VISTA member when I'm doing my site visits to kind of gauge their level of satisfaction and opportunities to enhance their work experience and work satisfaction. So those are the objectives essential out of the 5. Under the objectives, those are the 4 areas that I would invite you to think about. There may be other objectives you have. What are those 4 areas again? Project progress, support and resource needs, supervision and commitment, and work satisfaction. Now let's go to the 3rd essential element. And the 3rd one we talked about is communication and coordination, right? So let's ask ourselves, what are some of the things to keep in mind? Because sometimes if we have not intentionally done this, we can run into a lot of unnecessary situations. So that's why creating a thorough communication and a coordination plan for my site visit is so important. Not rocket science, most of you do this, but I'm inviting you actually create some kind of a template before you do the site visits. When you are being asked or reminded, or when you see in your ad that you have to do a site visit next month, one of the things I do is create a plan, coordination and communication plan. So as you can see, action items and with whom, right? So from clarifying my roles and responsibilities with my own supervisor to everything else, take time to do that. Because when you create such communication and coordination plan for each of your site visits, and when you create one for your first site visit, of course, you will be able to use it as a template for the next site visits. You may have to adapt it based on the situations. However, you will have some of the key major things in place, right? So that way, I know with all my other responsibilities as a VISTA leader that I have attended to all the important aspects during the designing stage as well as the implementation and follow-up stage, right? So we have a full sort of a strategic plan for each of the activity. Okay, so as you can see, even conducting the need assessments, with whom, when, those are the things I need to identify in advance, and also then look at when did I do that. because when next site visit, it will also help me to do a reality check. What does it take? How long I may have to start doing some things, because from my first site visit I learned I should have, initiated that maybe even a week before than what I had done last time, right? So also it's a good way of evaluating, because you are not only going to do one site visit, you will be doing so many site visits with each one of your members. So that's the third essential element out of the 5 elements. The fourth one is logistics. So logistics is not, something, this is something that generally comes to you all when you are thinking of a site visit, because we all go on vacation, we go on travel. So, some of these logistics can be very sort of second nature, right? It will come easily for us to think about. However, don't get carried away. With member site visit, sit down, and again, that's why that earlier plan is very, very important, that creating a plan. Because, let me give you an example. Let's say I have a member I am visiting. So we, have coordinated, everything is in place. So I'm going to visit my member at the person's school, right? So I'm driving there. Let's say I'm driving. And, we had scheduled a meeting with the member, with the principal or the supervisor. All that good stuff is in place. Now I'm driving and I got to the school surrounding to the area. What I realized, there are no parking. I keep driving around, drive 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks. Nope, there's no parking. All the streets are restricted parking, and the school has a parking lot. It is full. Now I got there 30 minutes before, right? In order to make sure that I'm there on time. Now I have been driving for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, still I cannot find a parking spot. Just think about the level of stress that I'm going through right now. I drove all the way to my member site, so excited, want to have this great meeting. Now that is a logistical question. Now that's the kind of logistics we need to think about in advance. So when my member say, hey, we will meet at 10 o'clock at my school. One of the questions I would ask my member, thank you, great, sounds good. Now, can you help me about the park, because as you know, I will be driving. Are there any things I need to know in advance about parking? If I had done that, my member would have said, hey, that's good you asked me that, because there is only one place you can park and it takes so long to come from there to the school, or I need to actually get you a permit, a temporary permit, so you can actually park on a certain place. If I had done that early on, I don't have to go through this stress, what I'm going through now, trying to find a parking spot. Everything would have gone smoothly. That's one example. Second example, my VISTA member said, Kapila, thank you for coming to visit me. I'm so excited. I'm working at 2 schools, so let's, meet here for school, and then we'll have these meetings. And then I will take you to the second school, and then we'll do the meetings. So because I did not ask about the second school and how long it might take to get there, I may have made assumption maybe it is a 30-minute drive. So after our first meeting with the first school, all that good stuff, we get on the car, and now we are driving to the second school. And then now I realize, my VISTA member says, this is going to take about 90 minutes to get there. Now just think about it. I just lost 1 hour from what I had assumed that I will have at the second site visit or the second place, right? So again, sometimes we don't think about these, kind of aspects to logistics because we may only pay attention to the key aspects. So I'm just giving those 2 examples just to get you to think about when you are doing your actual logistics to pay attention. Then the 5th element, the last element of the 5 elements is follow-up, right? Now this is, it's going to be very customized based on your site visit, each site visit. But the importance here is that we have to have a thorough follow-up plan after the site visit. It's not only just writing a report about the site visit, but like a thorough follow-up plan. Having, scheduling a quality meeting, time with my own supervisor to brief my own supervisor about the meeting, site visit. During the site visit, there will be many things that I will come across as the leader that I had promised, committed to the different people. I need to make sure that I thoroughly follow up on those, right? So when I come back, I have to have this plan together. Another thing that sometimes we forget is to thank people. My VISTA members, I might do it because I am in, constant communication, but writing a thank you letter to the site supervisor or to the other parties that I met, just telling them, thank you, simply, just, they taking the time to be available and show me around or have these conversations or, what I learned from them, whatever that is, sending some thank you notes. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. You don't have to go and buy a very expensive card. It could be just an email to each of these persons. Not a general email to everybody, but individualized email or whatever that we are going to use. Because there are certain outcomes, right? One is, of course, gratification. As a leader, we have to demonstrate that, live that. That's a trait, right? It's a human trait. It's not only a leader's trait. So that's one aspect. That should be the key. Then the side impact is, when I do that, it's good for my VISTA member, right? The VISTA member supervisor or the other people might say to the VISTA member, hey, in fact, your leader sent me a thank you note and talked about, how this was helpful. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the next visit as well. Right? And we are also setting a tone for the VISTA member. Sometimes our members can also learn about, like how to sort of follow up and thank people for their commitment. And being very sincere and genuine about it, not to do it for the sake of doing it, but doing it with the true spirit. Okay? So those are the 5 elements. As we said, those were what we were, talking about. As our objectives for today's conversation, that is to identify and examine those 5 essential elements, and then share strategies, ways to do that. So these are the the 5 elements we talked about. There may be more that you might come up with in your own situation, but I am suggesting at least these 5 pillars. Purpose for the site visit. Why? Why am I doing this? Why do, what is it that they are going to receive? Objectives. What is it that I am going to accomplish for my member and others? Communication and coordination plan. Who should I need to communicate, when and how? Who is it that I need to coordinate, when and how, and very specific aspects. Logistics, we talked about, and follow-up plan. So those are 5 things that I would encourage you. But before you go, there is a survey, as you know, so please take a moment to do that. But before I open the survey, let me open it up. Anything else? Are there any questions or any additional wisdom anybody has based on your own experience in designing and conducting member site visits that will help our colleagues here, because I don't want anybody to walk away with having some insight that could help us. So again, through the chat function, if there's anything else that comes to your mind, also any question, please. This would be your opportunity. So let's take a moment to see whether there are additional questions or any area that you are not clear or you may not necessarily agree. That's fine. We can talk about it, you know, how we might look at it, or any additional techniques, strategies, wisdom in relation to designing and conducting site visits. Thank you, Helen. Here we go. See, thank you for your generosity. And please look at the chat. Helen is being very generous, reaching out to all of you, sharing some resources in relation to site visits, templates. Thank you. Yes, so Kimberly asking, is it helpful to provide an action template to the members? So let me first try to see I'm understanding your question, Kimberly. So action template in relation to the site visit. Are you talking about the action template that you are creating for yourself, sharing it with the members? Is that what you're asking? Okay, so two things, right? Now, my action plan about the site visit, yes, I mean, I want it to be transparent, but there may be some elements that is not relevant to the member, but any element that is relevant to the member, I think it's a great idea to share with the person and say, hey, here's my plan when I get there. You know, meeting with you during this time, meeting with your supervisor during this time. So of course, I think we need to share that, those aspects, because then my member knows what to expect from me and also could help me to get the best out of that time that I'm going to be there during the site visit, so, right? So it caters to setting up realistic expectations, and also it creates clarity and transparency. Now, in relation to their projects, I'm not quite understanding what do you mean by that, Kimberly. Please help me here. Because in relation to their projects, what one thing is for me is like their the monthly reports they have sent. If there's anything that I have learned from that, that might you know raise some questions about the project progress. Those I will build into my conversation when I'm at the site with the appropriate parties to become informed and to see what opportunities are there to support them with those aspects. Then the WAD itself is one of the key instruments that I will, we will use, my member and myself as well as the site supervisor, assessing what's working well and what's not working well and looking for opportunities to fine tune them. I'm hoping I'm addressing your second part of the question. If not, please let me know. Okay, thank you, Kimberly. Are there any additional questions or additional insights? And thank you, Helen, again for your kindness of sharing that. Yes, Farah, indeed. It's always because, our neuroscience has taught us that as adults, not only as adults, children too, human beings, the first question we ask with anything is why. And that is what we are talking about, the purpose, right? So when it is clearly defined, it brings everybody in harmony, everybody on the same page. It becomes a partnership. So very, very important. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, Elena, exactly. Because sometimes things may not necessarily happen the way we assume them to happen. So you also have to have a contingency plan, right? Backup plan. So you have your key strategy, key plan, but also have another sort of a backup plan. What if something doesn't come through? Thank you. Very, very important. Okay, so thank you all, and please don't run away. Please take a moment. I would very much appreciate if you could kindly do the poll, because it's helpful for us to get your feedback. So let me open it. And you should be able to see it now. So please do complete it. And once you are completed, then we are done. So thank you very much again on a Friday, taking your time to join and share your wisdom. You all have been great, been very so generous, sharing your insight and input with each other, and actively participating in this conversation. So thank you so much. And also thank you for everything that you do day in and day out to make your members' VISTA experience a meaningful, fulfilling life experience. You may be, people may be acknowledging that. Sometimes you may not get that acknowledgement, but we all know how hard and effectively each one of you as a leader work to make that happen. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a wonderful weekend. Okay, take care all. Again, please, before you go, complete the survey. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the phone conversation, but the WebEx will be on for you to do the survey. Thank you all. Take care.